as Ethiopia has been influencing the Horn of Africa in terms of economy, and maybe others, and there are also the economic giants like United States and China, those who do have an interest, their own interest in the Horn of Africa and the region, and how this will maybe negatively impact Ethiopia's interest and influence.
One thing that is clear is there are powerful countries in the world. Those powers do have competition and conflict in so many ways. When, for example, there is a conflict or there is a competition or there is a trade war between China and the United States, it's not a war, it's not a competition and a conflict between two countries. It's a conflict between two worlds, the Eastern and the Western. It's a war, it's a conflict, it's a competition between different mega camps that will have a negative impact on other developing countries. If you remember very recently, America increased the tariff on all imported items from China. And China retaliated back in increasing 40%, 50%, and even 100%. That entirely distorts the world trade system. It distorts the world input and output supply chain. It distorts the world financial transactions. And by implied, Ethiopia and all other countries will be influenced through their fair share in the global market. So that really affects us and also other countries in the world. Another critical and important is these powerful countries. One of the geopolitical locations they want to have a dominance over is the Red Sea and the Indian Ocean. All of them have a base, and all of them would like to have a dominance in this particular region. So Ethiopia's effort of having access to sea, Ethiopia's effort of having a security basis, a military basis over Indian Oceans and in the Red Sea is being challenged and is being confronted by complex political issues. So even sometimes because of the conflicts that goes between these big powerful nations, your trade system is going to be affected. Logistically, we import when we export through the Red Sea and even the Indian Ocean. So all our trade system, to an extent of whatever Ethiopia import is being monitored. And for our security reasons, the items we import will be surveillanced, will be like, scrutinized, and so that Ethiopia really is affected in so many ways. Another is Ethiopia, at sometimes you stand at the crossroad. You need to align with one of the powerful nations. Do you stand with the United States? Do you stand with China? In terms of our trade relationship, in terms of our technical support relationship, in terms of our military support relationship, you always will have a choice to align in the, to be supported or support. That will again have a repercussion. Will have a repercussion and a significant negative impact. So the relationship that happens between China and or the Eastern and the United States will have a direct and a significant impact in Ethiopia. I would like to give you one particular example of what happened several years ago. When Obama was the president, I guess so, Hillary Clinton visited Ethiopia. Upon her arrival at the Ethiopian airport, there was a media briefing she gave. One of her statements was America supports Ethiopia through several technical cooperation, bilateral assistance, development assistance, and so many things. But many of the businesses, investments, commercial and trades are being dominated by China. This was what exactly her statement was as she was disembarking from the aircraft. What does that mean? Your trade relationship, investment relationship, financial relationship with one of these countries will have an impact of your relationship with the other countries. And so the play that happens between these two big powers will affect Ethiopia. And it's up to Ethiopia to think strategically, to be wise on how to align and how to play in that particular.
How do you see Ethiopia's recent economic reform, and what is your insight on it?
Thinking in terms of reform, looking at the broader spectrum of reform. Reforms are like, there are fiscal reforms, monetary reforms, there are financial reforms, there are trade reforms, what do you call it, institutional reforms, broadly speaking. Ethiopia has been undertaking several reforms over the past decade. One of, for example, the biggest reform was like a structural reform. Ethiopia moving from the agricultural sector into a light manufacturing, then into mega industries and into the service sector, in terms of creating an exodus from the primary sector into more to the manufacturing sector. And then there has been a lot in terms of reforming that's how the industrial parks came into existence. Many foreign investors came all the way from China, India, Turkey, Europe, and even from United States, and even from a couple of countries in Africa. So those reforms have really helped Ethiopia somehow progress in terms of having some industrial basis over the past 2 decades. There were also financial reforms that Ethiopia has been going through, a market-led pricing system. Also moving into a more a market-controlled regime in terms of determining interest, determining exchange rates, opening up the financial sector to foreign investors and the likes. Ethiopia has also made a reform in terms of privatization, moving a bit to a more free market system, privatization of state-owned enterprises, and also opening up many of the sector to privates. And that's how many investors have come into hotel and tourism, telecommunication, and all that. There are also certain institutional reforms in terms of moving the government's control of the market system to more unregulated and moving to a more free market system. So there are also institutional reform. If you remember, Ethiopia has done a great in terms of re-engineering the public services, re-engineering services in the business sectors, and introduced tools like BCC, MCC, to mention. So Ethiopia has gone quite a lot in terms of reforms. That reform has really helped for the emergency of so many private sector players, so many investors, and also providing swift service delivery systems, market playing a role, or market determining the true value of goods and services, or at least a relatively a better market-oriented determination of the value of goods and services.
Reforms of legal procedures as well, I think.
Exactly. There are so many legal procedures, proclamations that were lifted, that were loosened, and that were reintroduced to gauge the market. There were reforms in the tax system. The tax system was made to be somehow robust and broad-based, to ensure Ethiopia's self-reliance through its own means. So technological reform, if you've seen today, if you go to the financial institutions, if you go to markets, if you go to fuel stations and all others, if you go to private companies, the usage of technology has sharply increased. That was how the reforms that has been made there has brought promising change. So Ethiopia has gone through several reforms that has really created one free enterprise, free play, freeing the grounds. It has really enabled to somehow strengthen the private sector. It has really improved efficiencies of service delivery systems and efficient public resource utilizations. It has helped really to improve government revenue basis. It has really enabled the private sectors to expand into other territories that used to be like prohibited, or that were used to be delineated for government alone. So that has really brought significant change in terms of how we are now. But there are still, going forward, several things we need to do. Ethiopia is not perfect. We are at an early stage of the reform processes, and still there are a long way to go. One is peace, stability, and creating a secure domestic economy is an important reform agenda that has to be strengthened as we go forward. There are ministries that is being set up for this. There are several systems that there are commissions that the government has set up. That is going to be like a precondition for all the other reforms to be successful, and the government should do more in that line to ensure a robust economic growth and a robust economic expansion. Secondly, strengthening the structural transformation system. Still, significant percentage of what we call sacrifice. The lion's share of Ethiopians are still in the primary sectors. The structural transformation process still needs to be strengthened. The other reform I would say is a carefully monitored move toward the free market economy. It should not be like a haphazardous one. It should not be something that has to happen overnight, because we need to prepare the playing field. Sure. Rules, regulations, laws, skills, trained manpower. There is a lot we need. Institutions, there are a lot we need. So a carefully but definitely moving toward the free market. That transformation system needs to be strengthened. Another thing I would recommend is institutions. You know, our institutions are weak. Our institutions are failed. So reform in terms of having economic institutions that provides trade system and control, capacity building, that craft laws, regulations, and then conduct studies and research and monitors. An institution that provides support to the small-scale industry owners. Institutional development needs to be well strengthened. Financial service provisions. Still, there is long miles we've come, but still what remains is still is longer than what we have come up to now. Smallholder farmers, medium enterprises do not have access to critical financial services. So the reform we need in those fronts needs to be strengthened and needs to be robust. Trade connection. Ethiopia needs to continue of strengthening inland connectivity, technological connectivity, and air transport connectivity with the neighboring regions, so as to ensure our market system destinations are many, and not only many but diversified. One last thing I would like to mention is reform that calls for redistribution. Redistribution, in a sense, the focus, the concentration, the technologies, the industries are more concentrated in the central part of the country. We need to move part of this into the border areas where
to the peripheries.
Exactly, to the peripheries. Moyale, for example, can serve a hub of industrial places, or a hub of manufacturing, trade with countries in the southern front, like Somalia, like Kenya, even Uganda, South Sudan. The same is true to the Western, to Eastern. Such type of reform needs to be supported, strengthened by professions, by private sector actors, by international development actors. And what has been done so far is enormous, but what has to be done is still many that awaits us.
And the only thing I want you to add is what should be the share of scholars like you in providing insights like what you are doing now?
When many of the reform agendas started in many countries in Asia, the elites have played a leading role. When some of the economic transformation agenda began during the Industrial Revolution in Europe, the role of the elites, the role of the so-called educated, those with college degrees, was enormous. They provided theories underpinning some of the development philosophies. They provided research results, innovative ideas that would help government policymakers to take up it and put into implementation. So what I would say for the elites, for those, the technocrats, is instead of promoting what divides, I would suggest they promote what unites. Instead of promoting what disappoints, instead of promoting what erodes the hope, I would suggest them to promote what builds a hope, what creates a vision, what creates an inspiration, what creates an ambition for the Ethiopian people to move forward. They need to endeavor research, a research that can be translated into an action, a research that is problem solving, a research that is theory based but proven practically. They need to supply those research results, knowledge, innovative ideas, and empowers the young generation. Ethiopia is such a young generation endowed country. And this young generation needs empowerment. They need motivation. They need somebody who creates aspiration in their lives. So our elites, our educated sect of the country needs to endeavor to empower the young generation in the country.
Finally, if there is anything I missed and you want to add.
Like you said, Ethiopia is a very big country. Ethiopia is strategically located in the region. Ethiopia has a lot of stories to tell to the world, and have a lot of history that service to its significance. Ethiopia has a lot of potential and opportunities for fast and broad-based economic growth that can make poverty a history and improve the wealth of its nation. But to make advantage of those things, there are a lot that Ethiopia has to do as a homework. One is the work we do on the private sector is an important thing. The private sector in Ethiopia has so long been regime dependent. The private sector during the imperial regime have all vanished following the downfall of the regime.
Sure.
The private sector players that existed during the Derg regime, they are now a history. The private sector that mushroomed during the EPRDF regime, many of them are not existing. And the private sector that has emerged over the past 7 years, I am afraid they will vanish away following if regime changes. So Ethiopia needs to do a lot of work in terms of strengthening an independence of private sector that is independent of the regime, that's independent of a shortcut to wealth creation. Many of our investors, manufacturing sector owners, real estate developers, import and export business doers, they attempt to get into the apex of wealth through a shortcut. That must be avoided. And then a private sector that's driven by competition, that is driven by quality of services, that competes through prices, and the quality must be established. So in terms of the reform agenda, that has to be taken as a serious. If you have to make use of the trade corridor we are thinking, if we have to make use of the aspiration we have to be part of the World Trade Organization, we need to have a strong and robust, independent, competition-based private sector players. Ethiopia has to do a lot in that endeavor. Another important homework that awaits us is a reform that fights corruption and rent-seeking. In a country where there is corruption increases the transaction cost of doing business in terms of economics language. As the transaction cost of doing business increases, either investors are discouraged or the cost of goods and the services reach to be unaffordable. So since very recent time, you see corruption being infiltrating into different sectors and into different systems across the country. So there has to be a strong work that fights against corruption, rent-seeking, theft. Another is a reform or a work that targets to address the continuous rise of price. Unemployment must be really one of our homework. Inflation is becoming a significant problem, in fact, not only to Ethiopia, but to many African countries and even to the world. Today, as we speak, Americans are suffering from a high rising price of goods and services. Grocery prices are reaching to be unaffordable. But to countries like Ethiopia, which are developing and emerging, government strategies, policies, systems, tools that target addressing inflation, unemployment must be strengthened and must be really streamlined. Many of our neighboring countries import from a very distant land at exorbitantly high price, some of which takes 3 to 6 months to arrive. But Ethiopia, being a big country with a huge resource endowment and productive potential, should be able to galvanize its relationship ties with the neighboring countries through supply of inputs, outputs, labor, power, and all other economic resources. That will enable the tie and the relationship between the neighboring country to be very strong. And then along that, Ethiopia must even re-engineer its diplomatic ties with countries like Sudan and Egypt. Now that we have completed the dam and that the story of not building is already over, Ethiopia must travel miles to bring on board countries that are disappointed at this particular time. Ethiopia, to maintain its position as a strong nation under the sun in the Horn of Africa, the starting point would be strengthen its domestic unity, solidarity, and the relationship between nations and nationalities, relationship between regional states, and the relationship between the different functions within the countries. The different political parties and institutions must be strengthened. If that happens, I guarantee you there will be no force under the sun that can stop Ethiopia from achieving its targeted high level of economic progress in the years to come. So this is really the message I would like to convey to all the political party members, to the government in power, to the elites, to the farmers, to the teachers, to the simple citizens, to those who consider themselves as in the responsible position, focus on building national unity, solidarity, so that Ethiopia will really achieve what it has been aspiring for the past hundreds of years.
If time doesn't limit us, we will talk a lot. Dr. Guto Teso, thank you very much for your time and for your wonderful insight. And we appreciate.
Thank you also for giving me the opportunity to speak.
Dear viewers, I think you have got some very important and critical insights. This is all about our discussion for today. Until next edition, goodbye.